This is English shorthand dictation number 256 and the dictation speed is 140 words per minute. Ready? Start. The preparation for the first assembly election in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir began this week after the Election Commission initiated the process of revision of electoral rolls and asked officials to complete the process by August 31. This comes after the delimitation process, which added 6 extra seats in the Hindu-dominated Jammu region and 1 in the Muslim-majority Kashmir. This has narrowed the gap between the two divisions and stoked the ire of Kashmir-based political parties and citizens. The revision of electoral rolls is a welcome step. The restive region, which lost its special status 3 years ago, has seen an increase in violence in recent months. This underlines the importance of political, social, and humanitarian outreach to go hand in hand with security and administrative response. It is clear that repairing the fraying social fabric and reversing the panic felt by Hindu minorities in the valley will need not only a muscular security posture but also a soft touch and political engagement with the mainstream parties. A free and fair election can not only give voice to the aspirations of people, it can also provide a vent for bottled resentment and temper the alienation felt by sections of the population. For this, mainstream parties will need to be seen as stakeholders in administrative and political processes, and the poll process will not only need to be legitimate and just, but also seen to be so. An open process of preparing the electoral rolls, along with taking mainstream leaders into confidence and having a robust mechanism for grievance redressal, can go a long way in improving the health of democracy in the valley and forge a durable social compact. In the upcoming election for the next President of India, the ruling coalition has a glide path to victory. The National Democratic Alliance is within striking distance of a majority in the Electoral College, and with the support of some regional parties, its nominee is almost certainly the next President of India. Yet, for the opposition parties, the poll is the most important test on whether they can resolve internal and long-standing contradictions and come together on one platform to take on the might of the Bharatiya Janata Party. 17 opposition parties took the first step towards this goal on Wednesday when they decided to field a consensus candidate, though they indicated that it will take some more weeks to zero in on a nominee. The post of President of India is a position more encased in prestige and symbolism than material political power. In this election, the challenges are naturally different for the two blocs. For the opposition, the stakes are higher. The ruling party has been immensely successful in setting the political narrative over the last 8 years. This election is a test for the opposition to prove that it can set the narrative, that it can forge a minimum common program for regional forces and the Congress to come together, that it can pursue a national agenda even when competing with each other in some states, and that leaders can temper their personal ambitions and dislikes to come together. At a time when opposition leaders allege political vendetta in central agency, such unity can become an important political counterweight. For the government, it is almost a certain victory, but the challenge is to nominate a candidate who can encapsulate the social and political messaging that has become an innate part of the presidential election. After a political signal to the Dalit communities in 2017, the ruling coalition will be looking at another symbolic coup. Symbols matter in politics, and there is none more prestigious than the office of the president. Despite the relative lack of suspense over its outcome, the July 18 election will be important to see who gets their symbolism right and what the larger message to the nation is. The Government of India has introduced a new recruitment scheme called Agnipath for armed forces. The main advantage of this scheme is that India's youth will be exposed to a disciplined life and a pool of young talent will be available for the defense forces. Agnipath has struck at a basic fundamental of the armed forces. How does a nation equip its fighting forces? It is a radical departure from a methodology that was arrived at over 2 centuries ago for the Indian Army and many decades for the Indian Navy and the Indian Air Force. Such a fundamental churn should have been implemented in stages through pilot projects, just the way short service commissions and the entry of women was done in different branches. Of course, there is likely to be no dearth of volunteers considering the high rate of unemployment, and this may be seen as a success of the scheme. But we should spare a thought for the 75% of new young recruits who will be looking for a new job after 4 years. Lateral movement into the police forces and government departments has been a mirage till now. It can be done only if the government issues orders with enforceable, judicially acceptable reservation quotas and not just preferential consideration for the recruits under this new scheme. A good first step is the government announcement of 10% reservation for 3 recruits. These recruits in the Central Armed Police Forces, Assam Rifles and MOD. Let us talk about the professional upliftment of the forces that Agnipath is supposed to bring in. If you ask any field commander who his selected people will be for executing tasks, he will tell you that they are personnel with 4 to 5 years of service who have the right mix of training, experience and youthful exuberance. In Agnipath, 75% of such recruits would be bid goodbye. The armed forces would be losing human resource at a stage when combatants would be ideally placed to form the business end of the stick. In Indian Air Force, at the 4-year service stage, an aircraft technician is barely reaching the expertise of signing for the servicing of an aeroplane. Till then, he is an apprentice working under the tutelage of a senior. Thereafter, he undergoes training again for the more specialized second line servicing and comes back to add experience to the unit pool. Any shortcut here would be disastrous. The same would hold true for the other 2 services. Sometime in the beginning of this century, the Indian Air Force tried the just-in-time training concept. At the training stage, airmen were given basic aircraft knowledge and sent to flying units. These airmen were to work and learn in the field under experienced tradesmen and after 2 years go back to training institutions for the next qualification. But practical realities required airmen to do guard and escort duties and other routine unit tasks. Since the experienced technicians could not be spared, these airmen were detailed, resulting in them not being trained in the field. To cut a long story short, no commanding officer wanted these airmen under him, and the Indian Air Force had to recall this profile. A new idea failed because it was not well thought through. The Agnipath scheme is much more complicated. It may have a raft of social ramifications when a large body of trained men and women are sent back into society, many of whom without a stable job for the next 4 to 5 decades of active life. The talk of having instilled discipline, valor, nationalism and passion during the 4 years in uniform will weigh heavily against the pressures of an unemployed existence. Would any corporate firm hire a person seen as a reject of the armed forces? A key aim of this whole exercise appears to be reducing the ballooning pension bill of the armed forces. This is short-sighted approach. This reminds me the statement of an Indian Navy veteran who said, "If you think pension is expensive, try defeat." There is one more important point. At present, a recruit is called a soldier, sailor, or airman. Why, under Agnipath, should he or she be called by a different name if the nation expects both to be combatants ready to offer the supreme sacrifice? Why should there be a different class of soldier in the only organization where there is a common solitary dharma, service before self?